And welcome back to Encounters Live. Now, if you guys ever grew up during the 70s and 80s and were a huge fan of horror movies, you may recognize some of these names. Names like Zachary, Vampirella, and Elvira. And if you've heard those names, you have definitely heard of this gentleman who is on our program tonight. Now, he's a television horror host, arguably probably the most popular and longest-running host in the business. He's known in the Washington, D.C. area as Count Gore Duvall, a television horror host who originally appeared in Washington, D.C.'s WDCA from 1973 through 1987. Welcome to the program.
Well, hello there.
Hey, it's an honor to finally have a chance to sit down and talk with you. I'm really excited for the next hour coming up.
Well, let's get into it then, all right?
I'm ready. Now, listen, this whole genre, this whole industry of horror hosts, how did it begin?
Well, actually, it had two beginnings. The first one was arguably Vampira, who was back in the early 50s.
Okay.
And I was in Los Angeles, and she established this very sexy, dark figure with a low-cut dress, and she smoked a cigarette out of a holder, and she did this shtick that was just very spooky.
Yeah. Now, she was very sexual looking as well. Had the whole vampire genre going, and I remember she had a really skinny waistline and just really voluptuous looking.
Yeah, she had. Matter of fact, she cinched it into an 18-inch waist, which was incredible.
No way that's happening on this show, I can tell you that.
No. They're the same here. Well, while she was the first one, her show actually only lasted for about a year and a half. And there's really no big follow-up until 57. And 57 is the watershed year.
Okay.
Now, that's when Universal Pictures released what they called the Shock Package, which was the classic films, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Wolfman. All those were released to television for the first time.
Okay.
And the TV stations, now you have to remember back then, TV stations that were not really on 24 hours a day. There were a few channels, and they, in many ways, were like radio with pictures. They used the same kind of formula, so they decided that and it was recommended that they have someone host the movies.
Right. Now, there wasn't a lot of content, a lot of broadcast content back in those days, right?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, that's why this was such an important package, because suddenly you had a whole bunch of really good, approximately 2-hour movies. Actually, 90-minute movies, but with commercials and with the host that stretched it out for 2 hours. And boy, I'll tell you, it just every market that had one had a horror host that went along with it. I grew up in Chicago, and my horror host was I'm blanking on it real quick. He was a beatnik.
Oh, I know who you're talking about, and I can't think of his name either. I know who it is.
Yeah, it'll come. Now, it's one word. It'll come to me. But anyway, he and his wife, whom we never saw her face until the very end, hosted this. They had actually a live band occasionally, and they did a lot of shtick between the breaks of the movie. And it worked out. It made an impression on me. Of course, like everyone else, I had to quietly sneak down and turn the TV on late at night.
Right.
Parents didn't want me to watch the scary films. Marvin, yes.
Okay.
His name. So anyway, and that's when so many, including Zachary and all these other hosts, popped up. So this I called really the first generation, the VHF horror hosts.
Okay. Now, the rumor mill around the business says, some of these movies weren't exactly the most terrifying, the most well-scripted. Some of them, kind of sucked.
Well, actually, most of the Universal package was pretty decent. You had the really A films, again, like Dracula, Frankenstein, and so forth. But let's face it, even by 1950 standards, they were not that scary.
Okay.
But then there were other films. Of course, in the 50s, you also then had the big bug films, where any bug that got near radiation became huge and became a monster.
Right, the frogs and the spiders.
Yeah, and then follow into the 60s. You got Roger Corman coming up and making very low budget horror films that were not very scary and kind of low budget, but they were still fun.
Right, right.
But so your first generation of horror hosts started in '57. But you know what happened? You hit it right on the head when you talked about the TV stations back then didn't have a lot of content. So when they started getting more content, the networks started putting out more content, and the days were longer, and they did more news and so forth and so on. Pretty soon, by the mid-'60s, most of the VHF had gone away from horror hosting. So
Okay.
it kind of went away.
All right. Now, what I remember of it, because down here in West Palm Beach in South Florida where we're at, we had a program called Creature Feature that aired on Saturday nights. And the horror host was somebody who was funny. There was a lot of improvisation that went on in it. Sometimes you just never knew what you were going to get. But what was good about it was it helped you along through the night of not being so scared and terrified by the scary movie. It was a buffer, if you will.
Well, that is one of the models that was very, very popular, and I have to admit, when I first started, that's the model I subscribed to, and so many other people did too. Now, who is that, by the way? Was that Paul Bearer?
Down here in this area, I believe it was. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he was one of the VHF hosts, and he kind of lasted into with the second generation. Now, in the late '60s. The UHF stations came on the air, and they were in the same situation that the Vs were in the '50s. They didn't have a lot of programming. So guess what? They bought a lot of low-budget horror films and low-budget movies to stretch out the day, and they would take their weatherman, their kid show host, whatever they would have, whoever would be there, their announcer, and they say, here, you host it. So then you had the UHF horror hosts, which I am the second generation of, and they lasted pretty much mostly through the '90s. There's still some out there. Sunguli in Chicago, Son of Ghoul in the Cleveland area, and I'm going to miss a few others. And this is also the generation back in the '70s and '80s, or in the '80s when Elvira came along. So she was one of the UHF hosts too.
Now, originally, when you first started this, now were you working for the station or an announcer, or how did you get the job?
Well, the very first time out was I was working in Paducah, Kentucky. I was working as a rock and roll disc jockey, and the station had a construction permit for a TV station. The radio station was building a TV station. It was going to be the first UHF in Western Kentucky.
Okay.
So basically, everyone who was working on the radio station was asked, "What do you want to do in the TV station?" And I said I wanted to be a director, and I really didn't want to be on camera. So immediately they said, "Well, that's great. We'll make you a newsman, and you can anchor the news." And then we want you to be Bozo the Clown, and you can do the kids show 5 days a week live. And then I'm going, this doesn't sound like such a great deal.
Bozo the Clown.
Yeah. But one night, this is before the station went on the air, we were sitting around in the conference room, myself, the general manager, who was all of about 24 years old, and another one of our newsmen, and we were sitting around going through a case of beer, watching some film movie open. The packages of movies are like the 8 o'clock movie on WDXR, so we're watching these demos, and up comes this one, Night of Terror with M.T. Graves, which was actually a Florida horror host. I didn't know it at the time. So I was back there chugging a beer, and I burst out saying, "That's what we need, a horror host on the station." And the GM turned around and said, "You're hired." In addition to, so basically on Saturday nights, I would start anchoring the 10 o'clock news, and at 10:20, I'd throw it to the sportscaster, and then I would have 10 minutes to go into the men's room, put on my cape, costume, and whatever, and then get back in the studio to do live hosting at 10:30.
Now, what was your original name? Did you always start out as Count Gorneval?
No, actually, because, I didn't know I thought M.T. Graves was made up, so I just went with M.T. Graves.
Fantastic. So let me get this right now. You started out in television. You were playing a news announcer or an anchorman. You were also doing Bozo the Clown and M.T. Graves.
That's correct.
That's pretty diverse.
I was also doing radio. I was also doing radio news. And on weekends, I was doing personal appearances. And by the time, at my peak, I was putting in 100-hour weeks.
Amazing.
Now, I survived.
Yeah, actually. Now, the year was 1973, I believe, when
that was 72.
It was 72.
72. I started in 72, and I left the station in the spring of '73 because I was literally burned out.
What was the reaction initially of that first program? I mean, how did it go for you? Was there a big reaction to it?
Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, again, small market, local television, the first UHF, and we really kept it local. This was great. I mean, we had very strong reaction, particularly one night when I was I was doing there was a weekday night. It was doing the 10 o'clock p.m. news on radio, and I had a splitting headache. So I went back into the prop room and lay down on the coffin, closed the lid to take a little nap because I took some nap.
Okay.
And the chief financial officer was coming in, taking his wife on a tour, and he walks in and says, "And by the way, this is the coffin that Dick's going to get into." And he opened the lid, and there I was, and they both screamed.
That's taking your job to an extreme.
But it was a very quiet place to take a nap.
Very true, very
and
true.
mostly, most people would not open the lid.
Thought you were going to get away with it, huh?
Yeah, I thought so too.
Now, from what I understand, eventually that turned into your own program there, and I believe it's called Creature Feature as well.
Well, actually, what happened next was I quit there, and then I got a job in Washington, D.C. I went from the 77th to the 7th Market.
Okay.
And then I had to lobby real hard. Bozo brought me here, and then they had me do another kid's character called Captain 20, and I was kind of frustrated because I'm doing all these kid shows, but as I told the general manager, I need to talk dirty to adults at night.
Okay.
And so we argued for about 4 months, and finally in February of '73, I got the go-ahead to put the hosted horror show on the air. The vampire, he didn't like the name Empty Graves, the general manager didn't. He said he wanted something with Gore in it, so I said, that's fine, we'll call him Count Gore. And he said, it's got to be more than that, and I just threw out Duvall. And the question people keep asking was stuff on Gore Vidal. It could have been. There was a book on his desk that was written by Gore Vidal. But on the way to work every day, I passed the Duvall Funeral Home.
Ah, okay.
When it was, I don't really know. But he liked the name. We went on the air in '73. And as they say, the rest is history.
That's actually a kind of a huge thing on the internet. A lot of people are trying to figure out how you got that name. So now we've got the inside scoop, huh?
Yep, that's how it happened.
Now you came back and started this show. What was it like that first night in the studio?
It was kind of memorable because it was the first time that I ever been knocked unconscious.
Oh my God! Okay.
We had a very small set. We only had 3 4-foot 4x8 flats, so we had basically 12-foot wide. We had a coffin and a candle, and that was it. And we were showing him, and the movie was Teenage Caveman, and I said to one of my crew members, I said, here, go put on this loincloth, and I want you to swing in on this rope and just swing past me, and I'll take a pratfall, and you be the teenage caveman, and we'll put a scream behind it and so forth.
Right. Well,
he swung in and hit me square on, knocked me totally off the set, put me out cold, and then stood on me and said, "Hi, Mom."
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
We had a lot of fun.
So, is it a lot of improvisation on there? I mean, I can't imagine, as busy as you were with all the different characters and things that you were doing, that you had a lot of time to plan scripts.
Well, actually, we never called it improvisation because that's kind of like professional. So we just, in essence, what it was improvisation. Now, you have to understand also what was kind of at that time. The movies you couldn't watch the movies ahead of time because the movies would arrive on the Thursday before the Saturday because they were bicycled and they were shipped around. So Saturday night or Sunday morning, actually, they shipped out to the next station and they went around the country like that. There was no DVDs, there was no VHS. So basically, what we had to do was, if you saw the movie in the theater and you knew what it was about, then you could riff off of that. If you didn't, you just basically had to do a summary that was supplied by the distributing company, and then work off of that. So sometimes we'd play on the title, sometimes we'd play on the stars, sometimes we'd ignore the movie entirely.
Okay. Now, how did they show up? Were they just big reels?
Big reels of 16-millimeter film.
Incredible.
But one of the nice things about being in the nation's capital is, as I used to say, I wasn't the only bozo in Washington. There was a whole bunch on Capitol Hill.
Now, that's true. One of the things that you're famous for, and a huge contribution, was you got your jabs in. You got to satirize a lot of the and politicians there in Washington.
Yes, but it didn't. And party didn't make any difference.
Now, we're talking about the era of the Nixon administration and Ford and up through Carter and all of that into the Reagan eras and that. So you had a lot of stuff to make fun of.
Oh, we poked fun at all of them. Jimmy was particularly a lot of fun to play with because, of course, he had some of his extended family living at the White House and being a peanut farmer. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we did with Jimmy. But Ronald Reagan was, fair game, and Nixon was kind of tough because, as much as I really didn't like the man personally, and this was during the middle of Watergate, it was such a hot subject on Watergate that it really wasn't humorous. This was a very serious subject, so. You get around to maybe some of the henchmen for, the clowns that didn't quite break in well into the Watergate, things like that. But Nixon was a little tougher because it was serious national stuff.
Now, did you ever get any feedback for that? I mean, did you ever hear any rumors or anything? Anybody ever come back and say, Nixon said he really doesn't like you much?
Nah. The only feedback I ever got was actually from some people who I knew that were on the cocktail circuit who said that Gore Vidal was not at all impressed with my name.
Okay.
But on the other hand, the same people told me he had no sense of humor, so.
Yeah. Well, you know that they're watching this stuff. I mean, at least relatives, the family, somebody is up late at night. You know that they were tuned in.
Well, what was really kind of interesting, because I always wondered who my audience was. And the program director's secretary would come in and say, we were at the country club, and all the lawyers were there, and they're gathering around in the country club, and we're having drinks and watching you. And it was really, I'm going, wow, lawyers, powerful lawyers in the country club watching me on Friday night. They have nothing better to do, but that's okay. So finally one day because I didn't get to look at the rating books, which have the demographics, and I kept saying to my program director, Jim, who is my audience? What's the demographic breakdown? I need to know. And he goes, don't worry about it. Keep doing what you're doing. And I go, so finally he said, okay, you want to know who your audience is? It's half female and half stoned.
That's that. I think it's the same for this show. I believe we're playing to the same crowd here. So that's amazing, though. Now, your career spanned years and years. How long were you on television?
Well, I started in 71.
Okay.
And then, if you want to go television strictly broadcast, I left in 87.
Okay.
I did one. They brought me back in 99. The WDCA brought me back as the count to do the Millennium Special, which was an interesting proposition, to say the least, because by that time television had changed so much that we actually had to have classes in how to run a camera.
Really?
Yeah, because no one did live programming, because we taped as live. And the idea of actually moving cameras and zooming while you're moving and things like this was just so anathema. Everything was done by computer editing at that point. So it was really strange. But anyway, so we did the show in 99, but most of my recent past, from 98 on, has been on doing basically what I did on television, but distributing it on the internet.
Okay, fantastic. I'm more and more the internet is the way to go from what I'm seeing. In this realm of horror, paranormal phenomenon, all that type of stuff. We were with Clear Channel forever, and I found out that I actually have a larger listening audience on the internet than I ever did broadcasting and radio.
Same here. People all the time, they say, well, would you like to go back on TV? And I go, why would I want to? I said, if going back on TV, you limit yourself to one market. And right now, people anywhere in the world can watch my show. We have viewers literally around the globe, and I look at my audience count and my demographics, and they're much better than I had in Washington because I have a bigger pie to get a slice out of.
Now, what are some of your more memorable moments? We talked about the caveman. And you did so many films and so hosted so many of these over the years. What are some of the memories that come back to you when you think about that time?
Well, the one of the things that we had a lot of fun doing was every year. This is in the 70s now, so this is the mid 70s.
Right.
Every year, Penthouse magazine, actually a couple times a year, they would send out either their pets of the month or pet of the year on tour. And none of the other stations in town would touch these folks because they're serious news people, and this was not. But they would come by the station and I'd say, yeah, we'll put them on Creature Feature. Most of the time, we just had the young ladies come in and do little spots. Like, hi, I'm so-and-so, pet of the month, and Count Gore does me Saturday nights at 11. Do stuff like that. But two stick out in my mind. One, and I don't remember her name, actually. She came in, and this was a last-minute thing. I mean, we just put up one flat. We didn't have time to do teleprompter, so I just got some cue cards, and I wrote down what I wanted her to say. And we started off with, hi, and I wrote a blank, and I did the rest.
Okay.
We put her up against the wall, mic'd her up, and said, okay, when I point my finger at you, you just read the cue card. She goes, hey, I can do that. I go, okay. So I pointed at her. She goes, hi, I'm... And she says, there's a blank there. And I go, yeah, you're supposed to put your name in. Oh, okay. So we do it again. I point to her. She goes, hi, I'm... Wait, what's wrong? She says, could you write my name in?
Oh, my gosh.
Well, to be fair about it, I find out much later that most of these ladies were using stage names when they became, models.
Yeah, Sky and Star and
yeah, things like that. So to be fair about it, but it was so funny. I'm going, you don't know your name? Oh my gosh! But the other one that was really kind of cool, and I enjoyed working with her, was Dominique Moret, who was the 78 Penthouse Pet of the Year. She had her act together. She was also good at improv, which I very quickly.
Wow.
So we actually ran a seven-segment show with her where she was the county building inspector, and she was coming to inspect the dungeon. And we used so many double entendres in that I was wondering if the FCC was going to shut us down. I mean, it was like, she'd say, did you get a permit for this erection? And I'd go, what? You need a permit for that these days?
You got away with that in Washington?
Oh, yeah.
Amazing. One of the people, now, did you ever have a sidekick at all or anybody? Some of them are well known for having partners and people that worked with them. And the name Countess von Stauffenberger comes to mind.
She's as close as I've ever had to a sidekick. Part of the problem was Washington is a union market. I was a union performer, and if you had someone actually performing, as your sidekick, they would have to be paid.
Okay.
And the station was not about to pay anybody to be on my show. I could have guests on, like if I have a interview somebody about the new movie that's coming out, hey, Dracula sucks is out, we have the star right here. Okay,
okay.
Stuff like that. That was not a problem. And also, if we gave away, if we had a contest and the winner of the contest, the prize was to come on the show, we could get away with it that way. So that's how we got a lot of our guests on the show who were not celebrities. And the Countess is one of them. The Countess actually, when she was 15 years old, came on the show. Here's how this works. I get a letter in the mail. Hi, my mother, who's this famous portrait artist, would like to do a portrait of you.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. She says, we need a picture. And I thought this was a crank thing. Because we had a lot of crank calls. We had a few groupies and things like this. So I grabbed this blurry snapshot and I send it off. Forget all about it. Couple months later, your portrait's ready. The deal is my daughter gives it to you on the air.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
I can do that. Daughter shows up. I'm getting into makeup. My director comes in and says, there is this hot chick out there who is just barely staying in her clothes. And I'm going, really? And he goes, yeah. I said, well, what does she look like? Blonde, buxom. And I said, well, how old is she? He said, probably in her 20s. I go, well, that's cool. All right, so her mother. Well, mom's the one who did the painting. So
right.
Okay. Well, it turns out she's in junior high school. She's just well-developed for her age. Mom is a portrait artist. She did the official portraits for the Nixons and the Agnews when they were in office.
Wow.
And several of the governors in the state of Maryland. So I get this incredible portrait. Eleanor gets to come on the show, and it turned out we've developed a long-standing friendship. We were in a couple movies together. We kind of grew up together, and then occasionally we'd have her on the show. Now she's a regular on the web program. Every New Year she comes on and breaks my heart.
You know, there have been rumors about you two.
Oh, I'm sure. And, she's over there, when she comes on, and this will be the year, and it's going to happen. We're going to finally culminate this relationship, and then something always happens at the very end.
Yeah, every time. I guess they call them near misses.
Oh, yeah. She's one miss that I would really not miss or mess with anyway.
Now, from what I understand, you secretly began transmitting your own show. Now, long before the station actually made the announcement that they were going to be doing stereo broadcasting and stuff, you were already doing it.
Well, what happened was we just bought a new TV, and at that time, stereo was kind of new, so some of the new TVs had a little red light that would go on when the program was in stereo.
Right.
So I get this new TV, and I'm suddenly watching our station. I'm noticing the red lights on. I'm going, that shouldn't be. So I go to the chief engineer. I said, Jerry, why is the red light on? He goes, well, we've been testing. We're going stereo. I go, really? He said, yeah, we've been broadcasting in kind of a synthesized stereo, but we're doing the carrier out there and the sub channel so that the light comes on. I go, really? I said, well, what's going to happen? He said, well, they're planning a big to-do. They're going to have a special program and all this. I go, really? And so I said, thank you. And I go in, talk to my director, and I talk to my audio person. And I said, can you make this audio board go stereo? And he goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. So then we talked to the engineer on duty. I said, can we patch this in so we can go stereo? He goes, oh, yeah, we can do that. So quietly, we do this show where I'm doing stereo. We do all the typical shtick of Gore swings from one speaker to the other on a rope. We have a screen coming in from one side to the other. We're doing all sorts of, and then we have three Gore Duvals. We have one in the right channel, one in the left channel, and one in the middle. Right wing, left wing, and centerist. Okay. Right. And so the movie was Zardos, and it went on the air. We didn't tell anybody that we're doing this, except for the engineer on duty, because he had to switch it so that it would actually go out as stereo rather than synthesized. Right. And we aired it, and the Monday, my program director was very unhappy because we made a big deal about it on the air that, hey, we beat everybody. But anyway, I survived.
Amazing. Now, 1987. Something happened, and I don't know, and I'm very curious to find out. The new owners of the station, WDCA there in 1987, made a decision to cancel local programming.
Actually, they made the decision in 86, and it took them about 4 or 5 months to finally fire enough people and get contracts and stuff like that so that they could actually shut down the production facility. What
happened? I mean, what was the catalyst for that?
Actually, it was the hubris of the owner. The owner was a man by the name of Tim McDonald, who, ironically, was the man who actually carved the tombstone that I still use in the open.
Really?
Yeah. For a very short time, he was the program director of the station, and he liked Gore. And we talked about it when he bought the station. He said, but Gore, here's the deal. He said, I told my backers, the people who gave me the money for the station, that I can make a lot of money on this station by shutting down the production facilities. He said, I can run any station in the country with 37 people or less. And at this point, we had about 120 people on staff. So that meant there was going to be no one left but the sales staff. And that's pretty much what happened. Okay. For about 6 months, I was watching my crew dwindle, fewer and fewer people, friends getting fired, and actually they kept me on primarily again because I was a union performer, and they didn't want to pay my severance. They were trying to get me to quit.
Well, you're also one of the most popular figures, in the business. You were doing public appearances, live shows, different events and things there. Pretty popular guy back then.
But that doesn't make any difference. That doesn't make you money. They're paying me to be popular, you know. So if they fire me and they lose some popularity, that's fine. They can. As the guy said, he says, I'm just going to plug this station into a satellite. And we can make a lot of money that way because we have no overhead. So
amazing.
You know, and there's, you know, I understood the mentality, and frankly, I held no grudges other than the fact it was a very sad time. Matter of fact, when the general manager or the program director finally called me up to his office to fire me, he said, "Okay, we've waited you out as far as we can go. Here's your check for your severance. You know, you're free."
Amazing. Looking back at the production facilities and things that they had back then, how big was the actual set? Because, I mean, you know, on television it looks big, but you know, I've done some television stuff, and I know they're always cramped for space. There's not a lot of room. How big was the place you were working in?
Well, the studios, WDCA had two of the biggest and best studios at the time. Matter of fact, the A studio, which was put in by the owners, Taft Broadcasting, was state of the art and was actually going to be used as a hub for a supposed network that never happened. So we had this huge studio. The set itself was not very big. It was, the coffin itself is, let's see, about 6'6", and we had 4 feet on one end, 4 feet on the other end, 3, so that's 6 to 8, 14. There's maybe about 16 feet long, and it had a depth of about only 8 feet.
Wow.
And it was 8 feet tall. So it wasn't that big. My current set is actually 5 feet longer and 4 feet deeper than the one I had in this big studio.
How many coffins have you been through over the years?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 coffins.
Yeah, the problem with most coffins are the hinges. They don't really put strong hinges on because they're supposed to be opened.
Yeah, they're not built for opening and closing a whole lot, huh?
The one metal coffin that lasted the longest, actually we welded the hinges on, and it lasted, you know, matter of fact, it's still being used. I gave it away to a guy who does props for productions in the Washington area. But my current coffin is a beautiful, solid maple coffin with reinforced hinges, and it's just lovely.
Wow. Yeah, the interior is pretty nice to look at, too.
Well, that was interesting. Someone back in the 80s sent me a picture of Vampirella.
Uh-huh.
And we mounted it on foam core and stuck it in the lid of my coffin. And as I would keep saying, it's the only way I can get her to come down on me. You know, so when we started the show back up in '98 on the internet, I actually went back. It was still in the coffin lid here in Washington. At that time I was in Chicago. So I went back to Tim, who had the coffin. I said, "Tim, you can keep the coffin, but I want the Vampirella poster back." And he said, "Well, it's kind of tattered." So we cleaned it up, and I touched it up, put it on new foam core, and put it back up in the lid. So. And
it's still there. How long has that been there now?
Well, you know, like I said, it was an original from the early '80s. So.
Okay. Now, the set, you know, I went on the website, and you kind of give a tour of the set, of the dungeon there.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing props that you've had in there for a long, long time. And I was really surprised. A lot of them come from fans and friends of the show.
Oh, actually, if I'm not mistaken, all of them do. When we started back, we took a little hiatus in the early '80s while they made me producer of like 4 different kid shows, and they said, "You can't do gore on the kid shows. You can do gore on a semi-regular basis, but we need to do these kid shows because our license depends on it." So when we came back on full time, we had very few props, so I basically came on the air and said, "Anyone who sends me a prop, I will send you this Gore Duvall nightshirt," which was this black long nightshirt with it had Gore's back on it. It was in 2 colors. So I got lots of props people sent him. One of the props is an actual human skull.
No way.
It was sent to me by a med student from Johns Hopkins.
Amazing. That's creepy. That's a little creepy for me.
Yeah, well, you know. But, you know, I actually had some of it was junk. But and sometimes we did personal appearances. For an anniversary show we did at a movie theater, your price of admission was a present for Gore. And usually there were props that we ended up using on the show.
Fantastic. Did you ever have a day, and we all have them, I have them on the radio show and things. Did you ever have a day when you just didn't want to be there, you weren't into it, Did you ever think, what am I doing here?
Oh, yeah. And I would play off of that. And there are several. I was looking at some clips not too long ago, and there was one of the shows where, I'm not coming out of the coffin. That's it. I'm not coming out of the coffin. This movie sucks. I'm having a bad day. I'm not coming out of the coffin. And then you hear the director saying, get out of the coffin, over the PA system. And I go, okay, so get out of the coffin, but I'm not going to do it. So he just played on this whole thing of being coaxed into doing something, and it turned out to be very funny.
Fantastic. Now, these days, you have continued to do this. You've done a lot of stuff, a lot of groundbreaking stuff. For instance, it states in the sheet here that you were one of the first hosts, or was the first host in America to broadcast an unedited version of Night of the Living Dead. Why is that significant?
It's not. It was a good publicity piece.
Well, I mean, do you feel that maybe there's some stuff in that movie that at the time probably might have been inappropriate for television?
There were two scenes that were. Let me tell you what happened on this. If there was a movie that had inappropriate content, there was a television version and there was a theatrical version.
Right.
And the theatrical version of Night of the Living Dead had all I can tell is there was two scenes that were included. And that is, there's a scene where you have you see this naked woman from the back walking up to the house, and that was usually cut out because of nudity.
Right.
And the other one was where the gas pump blows up, and we see the ghouls, because they're not zombies at that point. The ghouls are eating the intestines of the people who got burned in the thing.
Right.
It was kind of creepy and gross, so that was cut out. So what happened was, my program director comes to me and says, how would you like to run the unedited version of Night of the Living Dead? And I said, well, why not? Who cares? He goes, well, I said, is the FCC going to give us any grief about the fact that, we've got, he goes, I don't think so. He said, they don't stay up at night. So I found out what happened is someone sent us theatrical print. So I said, well, let's run it. So we made a big deal about the fact that we're going to show it unedited, and that's how it came out.
Okay. Sometimes the best things happen there just by mistakes and flying by the seat of your pants. Sometimes I
had a working relationship with my initial program director who got the show on the air, and he didn't want to know what I was doing in advance. He wanted culpable deniability. And I'd go to him and say, Jim, I'm a little concerned about. He said, I don't want to know. Don't want to know. Do it, but don't tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that a lot at WBZT when we were there. All the things that we couldn't do, that we couldn't get away with, I found out it's easier just to do it and apologize later.
Absolutely. Ask for forgiveness rather than ask for permission. It always works out much easier that way.
So here we are, it's 2010. Looking back on your career, is there anything you would have done different? I mean, are you glad you did it, that you stepped into that role? And how you doing today?
Actually, I'm really glad we did it. Gore has turned out, of course, I did immediately upon creating the character Count Gore Duvall, I immediately protected it and copyrighted it and trademarked it. So I made sure that I owned the character.
Very good. Which
is very, very wise. But yeah, my wife once said, Gore is really an extension of your real personality. And I go, okay, I can live with that. And so I'm really glad. Like you said, we had down days, we had up days, we had days when we didn't want to do it. I'll be honest with you, today I just found out that some of the stuff that I need for this weekend disappeared off the tape. I think it got erased, and I'm going to have to go down to the studio tomorrow and reshoot it.
Oh.
I'm not at all excited about it because it's just a little bit, so I'm going to spend a half hour getting into makeup, another half hour getting out of makeup for 2-3 minute bits. But it's fun. It has given me some recognition in the community, in the horror host community, and which is a very active and vibrant community, by the way, right now.
Yeah.
This past spring at Horror Hound, they had at the Horror Hound convention, 83 horror hosts gathered under one roof.
Amazing.
To pay tribute to Vampira. So it was, that was so.
That's incredible. Yeah, there are documentary films out there, and that's the reason I made the decision. I gotta contact you. I gotta talk to you. I saw a documentary film. I was cruising around in the library, and there it was on the shelf, and I said, this rocks. Because it took me back to those days of, like you said, sneaking down, sitting on the couch, keeping the TV turned down low, and it produced this documentary was amazing, and it talked about the history of horror hosts and the sacrifice, because if it's like this, you're not getting paid a lot of money for it. You're not doing it you're doing it because you love it.
Absolutely.
And I realize that sometimes that's not always the best reason for doing something.
When the mortgage bill comes due, you say, I'm doing it for love, and they go, but that's not going to pay the bills.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but you're still busy. You're doing lots of things. Tell me about the convention circuit, man. There's Horror Find out there, Cinema Wasteland, Balticon. I know that there's a bunch of others, HauntCon out there and stuff. Are you keeping busy with that?
Actually, I don't do that many conventions. I've done every Horror Find except for the last one, because I already had contracted to do another engagement when they had changed the date and told me about it. I hope to do it next year. I do Cinema Wasteland at least once a year. That's in Cleveland. I'm going back to Monster Bash, which is in Pittsburgh coming June. I would love to go to Chiller. I'm just waiting for an invitation. I don't go anywhere where I'm not invited, but I really want to meet Zach Riley. He's the last of the original VHF horror hosts still around and still active and still alive, and I just got to meet him. I've done a couple on the West Coast, done a couple down in the South, but I don't tend to do that many conventions, primarily because my real job, because horror hosting doesn't pay the bills, particularly on the internet. I own and operate a mobile DJ company, and when our weddings, they're on weekends. So,
fantastic.
You can't turn down work to go to a convention.
How cool would that be to have Count Gore Duvall hosting your wedding?
Not this Halloween, but a year ago, Halloween 09, I actually was hired. One of the things I also do as the Count and also as Dick, I do stage hypnosis. And I was hired by this couple. They were having a Halloween wedding, and they wanted me to do a hypnosis show at their wedding reception.
Amazing.
And we made the Washington Post. It was so good.
Well, we get invited occasionally. Trish and I, my wife and I, get invited because we're in the paranormal genre. We get invited to a lot of conferences and stuff, and I got to put your name out there, man, because I cannot believe that the Count is not out and about and just getting slammed with requests. So I'm going to definitely do that. Tell me about this website. Now, I don't – there's probably a lot of our listeners who don't get what you do there because they're thinking, do you host scary movies there or what's going on with it?
Okay. Well, let's go back to the beginning. In 98, I was faced with the problem. I couldn't host movies in 98 because everyone was still using 28.8 dial-up.
Right.
You couldn't stream video.
The good old days of CompuServe and
CompuServe, Netflix, or Netscape, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did was I took the essence of, I said, what do we do on the show? Well, I talked about movies, so we did movie reviews. I talked about books. We did book reviews. I would go to conventions and get audio interviews with stars. Matter of fact, the first one I ever did was Dee Wallace, and the second one was Kevin McCarthy, which I just reran at the time of his death. And we did audio interviews. And then in '99, more people were using 56K, and I could, do a little bitty tiny thing. So we started streaming some video.
Those little 320 by 240s, man.
160 by whatever it was.
Okay.
Now, I'm a stickler on quality. That's why I could have done 320 by 240, but it would have been chunky. And if I did it smaller, it looked better.
Right.
I was always interested in quality.
Yeah, it streamed better. You didn't get pauses in it.
Right. And I try to keep current with technology. I guess about 4 years ago, we started doing interviews in HD, so that the interviews were in HD. We still do the movies in SD because the movies themselves are in SD. But anyway, if they come to the site, what do they see? They come into the dungeon, and the dungeon is the central location. It's done as a narrative. Every week I do a narrative. And we have a video at the front where it usually lasts about 2 minutes where I welcome and tell you what's going on. And below then are the details of the links. The movies, if you want to go watch the movies, they're up for 2 weeks. They're hosted, and they're in the lab.
Fantastic.
But we have Gail Como, who's a horror writer. She's been my longest contributor. She reviews books in the Tomb. She's the Tomb Keeper. We have Halloween Jack out of New Jersey, who does every week. He does all for the week, all the significant birthdays, death days, and movie opens in the history of film.
Fantastic.
In the Hall of Horror History. From the West Coast, we have Dita Dirtmap. It brought the most outrageous DVD reviews you've ever read.
Okay.
And we have, I know I'm skipping Athena, the Crow Girl. She does music reviews, primarily death metal and other metal bands. And she does interviews with the people from these groups. And it goes on and on. Rock Savage he's a Baltimore filmmaker. He does occasionally a contributing essay and sends over occasionally a film. We do show short films on their Creature Feature New Blood where new filmmakers can submit it. And if they're in the horror, science fiction, or fantasy genres, I'll host them on as a separate from the long feature film. So basically you have all these areas. There's about 30 different places where you could go, and it changes mostly every week.
Fantastic. Now, is there any room in the castle for paranormal stories?
Well, paranormal is something, I have this terrible interest in it. I would love to have a paranormal experience. And I would love to have, some kind of tie into the paranormal. So when we're done with this weekend, talk, as they say.
We gotta talk. How amazing would that be? Now, Count, there's one thing I gotta do here. Now, I gotta tell people about your website. I've been on it. It's amazing. Now, do you maintain that yourself? Are you the webmaster of Count Gore?
Yes, I am. I am.
It's an amazing site. There's all kinds. It's just a maze of all.
We've just added one new feature. Because, again, technology keeps changing. Starting 4 weeks ago, all the video that we produce is now available not only on your computer, but it's available also on your mobile devices, including Apple devices.
Oh, fantastic.
If you have an iPad or an iPhone or an iTooth, you can watch it on those. Maybe not the iTooth, but that's okay.
Technology is amazing. I can barely figure out how to get my show broadcast or how to even record it, much less, iPhones and all of that nonsense. But
it keeps changing, so you really have to really be aware. And I enjoy being aware of the technology. I enjoy that. I've always been kind of technically oriented.
Fantastic.
Again, the stereo thing was one of the things that kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sample.
You are a groundbreaker, sir, in the field. You are constantly looking at new ways and new ideas, and I applaud you for that. This website, CountGore.com, is an amazing journey through the horror genre, through the industry. It's full. It's just a maze of twists and turns and buttons and clickies and things, and you can literally spend hours and hours and hours on this site. And it's hosted by one of the most amazing people and probably one of the most popular in the industry, Count Gore Duvall. Thank you for being on the show, sir.
Well, thank you very much for having me on your show. And seriously, we can talk about this paranormal thing because again, I would love to get involved in that in some way. But
absolutely,
thank you. It's been wonderful, and it's been a good run, and we hope to keep it going for at least another couple hundred years.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to test your improvisational skills. Are you ready?
All right.
Here we go. My show is Encounters Live. It's Saturday evenings, 6 p.m. I need a 10-second liner. Ready? Go.
Saturday evening, you want to have an encounter with the paranormal, and there's only one place to have it, and that's... I forgot.
I love it.
Was it 6 o'clock?
That's fantastic, right there.
Again, when we're off, I'll cut one for you.
Amazing. Count Gore Duvall is my guest. It's been an honor to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much.
And as the Count would say, may all your blood be very, very warm.
Absolutely. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break. I'm going to talk to the Count, and we'll be right back. You're watching Encounters Live.
Greetings, I'm the Count Gore Duval. And do you know what kind of beans a werewolf likes, huh? Human beings.
All right, Tim, you ready?
Yeah, we're rolling. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Matt from Encounters Live, reminding you to watch our show from 6 to 8 p.m. Saturday evenings, Eastern Standard Time. We got everything. Ghosts, Bigfoots, UFOs. So remember to watch us. www.